Imagine being born into a world where you have never heard of money, telephones, or even love. A world where your teachers beat you for mistakes, where children are executed for stealing food, and where your own mother is simply a competitor for your next meal. This was the reality for Shin Dong-hyuk, the only person known to have been born inside a North Korean political prison camp and escaped to tell his story. This video is largely based on the great book Escape from Camp 14 by Blaine Harden. Find the link in the description below. Now let's get started with his early life. Shin Dong-hyuk was born Shin In-gwen in 1982 inside the walls of Camp 14, one of North Korea's most brutal political prison camps. But this wasn't just any prison. It was what North Korea calls a total control zone, where prisoners are sent to die through labor. Shin's parents never chose each other. They were prisoners paired together by camp guards as a reward for good work. His father was allowed to sleep with his mother 5 nights a year. There was no concept of family, love, or affection in Shin's world. From his earliest memories, Shin learned that snitching on others was rewarded, while breaking rules meant severe punishment or death. At school, teachers beat students for small infractions. One day, Shin watched as a teacher beat a young classmate to death for hiding 5 grains of corn in her pocket. Shin's world consisted of just a few square miles of Camp 14. He had no concept of an outside world, no understanding that there were countries beyond North Korea. He believed his imprisonment was normal, the natural consequence of the sins of his father's brothers who had fled to South Korea during the Korean War. Life in Camp 14 was an endless cycle of hunger, hard labor, and fear. By age 12, Shin had completed his basic education and was assigned to backbreaking work in the camp's farms and factories. Meals consisted of watery corn porridge and cabbage soup. Prisoners scavenged for anything edible, rats, insects, and grass. Stealing food was punishable by execution. The constant hunger shaped Shin's entire worldview. He couldn't conceive of any motivation beyond the next meal. When Shin was 13, something happened that would haunt him forever. He overheard his mother and older brother planning to escape. In the camp, failure to report an escape plan was punishable by death. Without hesitation, Shin reported them to the guards. Instead of being rewarded, Shin was accused of being part of the plot. Guards tortured him, hanging him over fire, driving hooks through his flesh to keep him still. When they finally believed his innocence, they forced him to witness the public execution of his mother and brother. He felt no remorse at the time. Camp 14 had robbed him of any sense of empathy or familial love. For the next decade, Shin continued his existence in Camp 14, moving between agricultural and industrial work assignments. Then something extraordinary happened. He met Park, an older prisoner who had lived outside the camp, even in foreign countries. Park talked about unimaginable things, buildings hundreds of stories tall, vehicles that moved without being pushed, and most enticing of all, food. Park described a world where people could eat rice and meat not just as a rare reward, but every day. For the first time, Shin realized there was something beyond the fences. His world expanded, and with it came a dangerous new feeling, hope. The decision to escape wasn't driven by dreams of freedom or democracy. Shin had no concept of these things. His motivation was simpler and more primal. He wanted to eat cooked meat and white rice just once. In January 2005, Shin and Park were assigned to collect firewood on a mountain near the camp's electric fence. With the guards momentarily distracted, they made their move. Park reached the fence first and tried to squeeze between the lower wires. The moment he touched the fence, the electricity coursed through his body. Smoke rose from his clothes as he was electrocuted. In a split-second decision that would change his life forever, Shin used Park's body as insulation and climbed over him through the fence. His own legs were severely burned by the electric current, but he was outside the fence, the first step in an impossible journey. With no map, no knowledge of geography, and no understanding of the world beyond the camp, Shin headed north toward China. He stole clothes from a farm, bribed border guards with stolen food, and somehow, against all odds, crossed into China. China wasn't freedom. As an illegal North Korean migrant, Shin risked being arrested and sent back. He found work at a farm, then a logging camp, staying silent about his past. He knew nothing about how to function in society. He didn't understand money or social relationships. Everything was foreign: flush toilets, televisions, cell phones. For months, Shin drifted through China, learning slowly about the world, haunted by nightmares of the camp. Eventually, he heard about South Korea, where North Korean defectors could find asylum. In 2006, he made his way to Shanghai and found the South Korean consulate. From there, he was transported to Seoul and began the process of becoming a free person. Freedom wasn't simple. The psychological scars of Camp 14 ran deep. Shin struggled with basic human interactions, with trust, with the concept of choice. He was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. What does freedom mean when you have never been taught to make decisions? What is a normal life when torture and execution were your normal? In South Korea, Shin began the painful process of learning to be human. He changed his name to Shin Dong-hyuk, symbolizing his rebirth. He learned about concepts like friendship, trust, and even religion. In 2015, Shin revealed that parts of his story were different than initially told. He had actually spent some time in a different camp, and some events occurred in a different order. However, medical experts confirmed his scars matched his accounts of torture, and the core of his experience remained undisputed. Shin's testimony brought unprecedented attention to North Korea's hidden Gulag system. His story became central to the United Nations Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in North Korea, which found evidence of crimes against humanity. Today, despite ongoing psychological struggles, Shin continues to advocate for the estimated 80,000 to 120,000 people still imprisoned in North Korean political camps. His journey represents something profound, not just escape from physical imprisonment, but the human capacity to reclaim humanity even after the most extreme deprivation. Shin Dong-hyuk's story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. How do we define being human? What happens when a child is raised without love, without moral teaching, without any concept of the wider world? If you found this story as powerful as we did, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to hear more extraordinary human stories.